We build investor audiences for small cap companies, retail and institutional. 33 years, thousands of clients. We are experts in messaging. National TV ad campaigns, investor webinars, digital media, reaching hundreds of thousands of investors. RedChip. We do it well, we do it right, we do it big. RedChip. Call us or email us today.
Quantum Leap Energy, and Stefano Marani, currently CEO of Renergen, who upon the conclusion of the Renergen merger will become CEO of Electronics and Rocketry. We will begin with a brief presentation in a moment, and then we will answer your questions. Welcome to everyone joining us today on X, YouTube, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms. To submit your question, we invite you to join us on Zoom. Use the link at the bottom of your screen. Once in Zoom, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your window and type your question into the text box. Before we begin, please allow me to read the Safe Harbor Statement. This call may contain forward-looking statements within the meaning of the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. All statements pertaining to future financial and/or operating results, along with other statements about the future expectations, beliefs, goals, plans, or prospects expressed by management, constitute forward-looking statements. Any statements that are not historical fact should also be considered forward-looking statements. Of course, forward-looking statements involve risks and uncertainties. I now turn this webinar over to the ASPI team. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Thanks, Craig, and thank you, audience, for your interest in this call tonight. So most of you know me. I've been on this call once a quarter, twice a quarter for the last 3 or 4 years. But today I'm honored to be joined by Rainer Pretorius and Stefano Marani to help. So you can see some of the other executives we have at ASP Isotopes. So perhaps I'm first going to ask them to introduce themselves to you, and then I'll run through a quick update on what we've achieved in the company since our last RedChip call about sort of 2 to 3 months ago. Then we'll open up to Q&A. So it's a fairly quick prepared remarks from ourselves and plenty of time for Q&A. So Rhino, perhaps you can just introduce yourself, where you came from, how you got here, your background, and then we'll go from there.
Hello, I'm Rainer Pretorius. I studied chemical engineering at the University of Pretoria way back in the day. My first job was at the Pebble Bed Modular Reactor Company in South Africa, which was the genesis really of modern SMR reactors, and unfortunately was a little bit too early to the market, and that got closed down. But luckily for all of us, now we have lots of SMR companies in the world, so that's great.
But most of those employees left South Africa, went to the US to start up the SMR companies in the US. So it brought some good stuff to the world. But anyway, continue.
After that, I worked at NEXO, which is the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation, where I worked on the fuel side, i.e. the fluorination side. And I did a PhD and a master's there and developed some new fluorination techniques, specifically on some very heavy metal fluorination. After that, I worked for an EPCM engineering company, where I developed first-of-a-kind technologies for clients, did techno-economic evaluations, and developed a few new technologies myself. After that, I started my own company, where I did basically the same thing, where I provided engineering services, techno-economic analysis, and scale-up capabilities. And I'm very happy to say that we assisted very many clients in scaling their technologies up from a beaker scale to kiloton scale. I closed that business down to move to the US.
I would add that's actually where we met, Rhino, about 4 years ago. When I acquired the ASP assets at a business rescue, I recognized straight away I needed more chemical engineers. So we immediately hired Rhino's firm to bring in the chemical engineering expertise we needed to ASPI. And then when Rhino moved to America, we hired them all and they came to work for us. So it was a good relationship. But Rhino, back to you.
Yeah, so I was going to say, yes, when I moved to the US, unfortunately to disband, but found a good home for most of the employees and helped some of them start their own engineering companies, which are still within the ASPI network. And I've worked here for 2.5 years now in the US. I'm currently in Milwaukee, so hello from Milwaukee, where I helped a couple of startups in San Francisco Bay Area scale up their technologies from small scale to big scale. I was contacted by Paul serendipitously at the end of last year and asked to join this ASP business formally and complete our engagement, our professional engagement. And here I am as the CEO of Quantum Enrichment, and we're here to bring the world some energy isotopes.
Great. Thank you, Rhino. And Steph, maybe just introduce yourself, a bit about your background and how you got here.
Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending. My background, my previous incantation, I was at Morgan Stanley. Ironically, at the same time that Paul was at Morgan Stanley, we were both in London, and he and I were doppelgangers. He was on the equity side, and I was on the debt side. And funnily enough, our bosses both reported to the same boss. So there's serendipity for you. I left Morgan Stanley, and for better or for worse, my co-founder Nick Mitchell, who is the COO of Renogen, and I acquired this stranded gas asset in South Africa back in 2013. And shortly after the acquisition, then discovered abnormally high concentrations of helium in the gas, which then resulted in us listing the world's first listed helium company. That was in 2015 on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We then acquired a second listing on the Australian Stock Exchange. And along the way, obviously, then started to develop the Virginia gas project into a strategically important helium and LNG business. And along the way, obviously, Paul and my paths crossed. And Paul, maybe you want to elaborate on that part of it, but that's been a journey of about 4 years, which has culminated in today.
Yes, that's great. Yes, so Steph and I met about 4 years ago. We stayed in contact, both had very interesting businesses. We sat down in November last year, got talking about what it would look like to put the two businesses together. And it became obvious, actually, that there were so many synergies between the businesses, and we really could create, a powerhouse of critical materials. Putting the two companies together, it became an obvious transaction to do. And so we, I think we formally announced it in probably April of last year. We hope it will close in the next several weeks. So thank you, Rhino and Steph, for just providing your background so the listeners can better know who you are. So I'm going to quickly provide some updates on what we've done since the last call about sort of 2 months ago, and then we'll go straight to Q&A. So I think the first achievement in the last sort of 8 weeks or so is we shipped our first samples of enriched silicon to a US-based customer. And that's really important because it's going to allow us to calibrate our measurements in the plant and make sure that when we get the final product, it'll be exactly where it wants to be. We think we're there, but we need to make certain before it ships. So that was fantastic. Second achievement is that we're in the final stages of enriching ytterbium-176. I think it's going to go before the end of the month, and that'll be fantastic as well. Well done to the team. We've been working 24/7 for the last actually 24/6. They have some days off for the last sort of 2 months or so on that. And right now they're running in a batch process, and so that's about sort of 3 to 5 hours of enrichment per day, 5 to 6 days per week. And we should have a semi-continuous process ready by the end of September. We've had a short delay there, and one of the long lead time items was hoping to finish it in the early part of September, but one long lead time item is going to be another 3 weeks away. And that should allow us to produce really large quantities of ytterbium-176, where we process for 24 hours a day, basically 3 months at a time. The carbon-12 plant is going well. There was an annual environmental inspection that took place during August. That took a few more days than anticipated, so they're about 10 days behind schedule, and that should finish in the next sort of few days or so. I think the final achievement is that we've signed a large MOU with Fermi, a very large US strategic partner. They're in the process of constructing a vast 11 gigawatt energy complex in Texas. And the idea of this MOU is to have a joint venture between QLE and Fermi to produce nuclear fuels. And ASPI will build a plant on the site to enrich strategically important isotopes for the US. And we really look forward to accelerating that project during the next several months. I guess the final achievement is yesterday we listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We went down to Johannesburg in the morning to blow the kudu horn. The kudu is a wild animal in South Africa, and so we blew the kudu horn at the opening of the exchange. And we owe it to the South African people to list on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We wouldn't be here without them. They've been extremely helpful while I've been here, and we've had a great reception from South African population. And so we felt it was our right and our need to list on the JSE. So we did that yesterday. So with that, there are my prepared remarks, Craig. With that, I'll hand over to you for Q&A, and I'm sure there's lots of questions from investors on the call. So over to you, Craig.
Thank you very much, Paul. We now will take your questions. To submit your questions, we invite you to join us on Zoom. use the link at the bottom of your screen. Once in Zoom, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your window and type your question into the text box. Please do not use the raise hand tool today, as we will not be able to take your spoken questions. Paul, we've already received dozens of questions. Here's the first one I'd like to use. When do you expect to break ground at the Fermi site?
Right, well, that's potentially putting a cart before the horse, but I may let Rhino answer some of that. But, you know, we need to go through a licensing stage first, and we need to get the relevant permits and permissions. And so that may take some time. You know, the current administration has promised to accelerate all nuclear permits. Things appear to be done in record timing, but you know, I think breaking ground. Let's get permits first. But Rhino, anything else to add to that?
Yes. So I think I'll answer this question with one of the other questions from Anders Grieve in the chat or in the question section. Yeah, we're looking to as the saying goes, ASPI stands for as soon as possible isotopes. So we want to get involved as quickly as possible at the Fermi site. When we visited them 2 weeks ago, they were already doing geotechnical preparation of the soil and preparing for concrete to be laid. So they're moving at light speed. And to answer part of Anders' question here, we are looking into the enrichment side, conversion and deconversion. And we'll move as fast as we can in terms of timeline.
And Fermi expect to have the first gigawatt of power available by next summer, so the Northern Hemisphere summer, and they can probably bring that forward to March if a customer needs it by March. So, you know, this team is moving at rocket speed, and you know, I think we're similarly aligned with them that the world needs this now, not in 10 years' time. But yeah, thanks for that question, Craig. Next question, please.
Can you sell HALEU from this site to any customer?
I believe in theory we probably can. However, we will likely get long-term contracts with strategic customers lined up before we commit capital to the plant. So in theory, those customers could be any customers. You know, I'm pretty skeptical on the SMR market myself. You know, maybe there are 70 SMR companies in development. I bet you 67 fail. If I'm wrong, I suspect 68 fail, but we'll see. You know, so we've selected partners right now who we think are going to be successful, but in theory, we can sell to any customer. I suspect there will be US-based customers as well.
Gentlemen, in addition to HALEU, what other isotopes will you produce from the Fermi site?
So it's a good question. So I mean, Rhino's been looking very closely at building a lithium-6 and lithium-7 plant within Quantum, within QLE, and I'll let him talk about it in a moment. And then, you know, we believe the US needs a lot of semiconductor gases and strategic gases for semiconductors, and so it's an obvious place to build a plant to enrich, you know, silicon-28 and other isotopes. Well, you know, the US needs to maintain its advantage over against the rest of the world in semiconductors. But Rhino, maybe talk quick about lithium-6 and lithium-7, and their needs and their uses and why the interest in them.
Sure. So lithium-6, lithium-7 are some very interesting isotopes. They can be chemically separated, which is odd, but that's beside the point. Lithium-6 and lithium-7 are critical to both fusion and fission. Lithium-6 and 7, respectively, are used in tritium breeding that is critical towards energy security and is critical for fusion. So most of the fusion reactors in future will look at deuterium-tritium fusion. And tritium is not a naturally occurring isotope due to its instability, so it needs to be bred from nuclear reactors. Lithium-7 goes into FLiBe, which is fluorinated lithium beryllium. And that's used as a cooling fluid for a lot of the up-and-coming SMRs, as well as some of the fusion reactors. So very interesting salt. I think the Fermi site provides an excellent opportunity for us to combine or actually bring back, because fluorine really came into its heyday with the Manhattan Project to actually convert uranium into a gas for enrichment. So having that capability on the Fermi site enables us to produce a lot of fluorinated chemicals that the market needs, such as semiconductor gases and some other heavy metal fluorides.
Great, thank you, Werner.
Do you think you will be able to get any grants from the U.S. government? Have you applied for any?
We'd like to think we can. We haven't applied for any yet. We've had good conversations with the DOE, many levels of the organization, and Renergen, which is Steph's organization, has got a huge amount of money coming from the DOE. I'll let Steph talk about that now, but we'd like to think that our goal here is to provide critical materials to the US to secure its needs, and so we'd like to think that many governments would like us to be in their countries helping us. Steph, maybe you can just talk about the loan we have from the DOE.
Thank you. So in 2018, the world went through the second of its helium crises. So far, the world has 4 helium crises under the belt in the last 6 years. The United States, which was predominantly a net exporter and the world's single largest producer of helium, in 2017 that all changed, and it's anticipated that around 2026, maybe 2027, the United States will go from a net exporter of helium to a net importer of helium, and this is obviously quite a disaster when you consider helium's criticality with regards to the semiconductors. Think the CHIPS Act and the onshoring of semiconductor manufacture in the United States. And then the second thing is its criticality in rocket launches, where bizarrely enough, one rocket launch uses about 12% of the entire planet's helium production for that day, just for one single rocket. So when you take all of that into account, Renergen was declared critical to US national security in 2018 at the peak of the second crisis. And that was under the then Trump administration. In 2023, Congress ratified the approval of a second loan to build the Virginia gas project, the phase 2 operation. That loan is a $500 million loan from the United States government through the DFC, and that was ratified under the Biden administration. And that is for us to produce and bring online the Virginia gas project's helium supplies, which will represent about 8% of the entire planet's helium supply. Funnily enough, that'll only be around 4% of the Virginia gas project's acreage, just giving you an idea of the extent and the magnitude of the deposit in South Africa. To Paul's point, it means that between Renergen along with ASP and QLE, we have so many multiple touch points with the government, and we've through the various transactions that we're doing, we only seek to strengthen our relationship and collaboration with the US government. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see that there are significantly larger areas of collaboration and potential grants that we see coming out of this.
Can you update us on the timing of the QLE spinoff? Is it still expected during the second half?
Yes. So it is expected in the second half, and so far, I haven't spoken to the lawyers for a week or so, but the lawyers are dealing with it right now. There's various SEC filings that have to happen and what have you, but I think we're looking good for an October, November spin, but again, subject to all the regulatory kinds of. Actually, the thing that may delay is I'm in hospital in September, October for some surgery, so we'll have to see how quick my recovery is from that. But yeah, hopefully we're looking good for October, November, that kind of time frame.
Thank you, Paul. Please talk about the synergies between Renergen and ASP Isotopes. How does this business fit into the ASPI business, and when do you expect the Renergen business to break even?
So I'll give a very high level overview. I'll let Steph answer the rest of it. But I mean, the goal here is to create a vertically and horizontally integrated critical materials business, and helium is the backbone for any electronics semiconductor fab. And we aim to make isotopes that will enable next generation semiconductors. And so the goal here is to have a vertically and horizontally integrated business. But Steph, why don't you take a crack at answering that question, please?
It would help if I came off mute. The signal dipped. So, Paul, could I ask you to just quickly paraphrase the question again, because I missed the question.
Yeah.
I only heard your response.
Basically, what are the synergies between Renergen and ASP Isotopes, and how does this business fit into AS? And then also, when do you expect Renergen to break even? And maybe actually don't answer that last bit because we haven't given that guidance, but the rest of it, great.
Perfect. All right. So, first and foremost, as I mentioned before, helium is the backbone to the semiconductor industry, as well as to the rocketry industry. Now, when you consider around 2015, 2016, helium represented, the semiconductor industry represented around 4% of the world's consumption of helium. That's now subsequently changed. And as it stands right now, it's about 14% of the world's consumption of helium. And it's anticipated that that number is probably going to grow. The most wildly optimistic scenarios are 26% CAGR year on year for the next decade, which would mean that the helium industry would almost exclusively supply only two industries, and that would be semiconductors and rockets. But when you consider the criticality of helium in the process of semiconductors, think about this. The cost of helium per microchip is probably the 9th or 10th decimal. It's so small that it's very difficult to quantify. So it doesn't really matter what a fab is willing to pay for helium to manufacture the semiconductor in the first place. However, if you do not have helium for the day of production, the whole fab shuts down. There's nothing that you can do about it. And that cost for one day's loss of production because you didn't get helium puts you in a position where their losses exceed the entire year's worth of purchases of helium. And so on that basis alone, helium becomes such a critical input. It's inch wide, mile deep risk. And so the semiconductor fabs see helium as an absolutely critical piece in their supply chain. But now think about how many critical pieces that go into their supply chain. Silicon for the epitaxy process in the wafer, or rather silane. They need pure copper, pure nickel, pure silver. There are so many different pieces that go into the manufacture of a semiconductor, and the average person thinks that it's input in one factory and you've got a microchip ready to put into a laptop. It doesn't work like that. There are actually 5 factories at a minimum that a typical semiconductor will take to go through. It takes 5 months to grow a wafer. You've got so many different pieces that go into the supply chain. Now, we're creating a world first. We're creating a company that's going to have complete vertical and horizontal integration. That eliminates such a significant portion of risk for our customers that value alone is incredible. Aside from the fact that we're also going to make these materials isotopically pure, which in and of itself is a massive enhancement. So you're taking isotopically pure materials and you're taking the backbone, key ingredient that's necessary, that opens the door to discussions with absolutely any consumer of electronic gases on the planet, i.e. helium, and you put those into one, you can walk into any fab anywhere in the world and everyone is going to take you seriously because you have helium to sell them. And then you offer them isotopically pure materials. It becomes, as Paul says, a complete hand-in-glove fit.
Right. Next question, please, Craig.
Yes, the U.S. has helium. Why is South African helium so strategic that the U.S. funded the Renergen project?
Listen, that is a great question. And the interesting part is, if you recall what I said a little bit earlier in the call, the United States becomes a net importer of helium in the near future. Now, this changes the game. Think about a situation where you had a commodity where for 7 decades, more than half of the planet's commodity came from a reservoir that was artificially made by man. And that artificially made reservoir suppressed the price of helium. That reservoir ran out in 2018. That means that now you've got a commodity which is catching up with what its fair value should be, because the reservoir is almost done. That's the first thing, pricing stability. Second thing is that because the United States' reservoir is empty, it means that the United States now has to rely on its own natural production of helium. And at a concentration of 0.35%, you've got to sell an inordinate amount of LNG and natural gas in order to be able to produce meaningful quantities of helium. We're selling over 3%, which means that we only have to produce a small amount of LNG or even gas to power in order to be able to get very interesting volumes of helium out the ground. The third part that makes South African helium so strategic is that South Africa and the United States, despite what's being seen on television, the United States and South Africa enjoy a particularly strong relationship, with the United States being one of our biggest trading partners. Now you consider the fact that the rest of the helium is either coming from the Middle East or Russia. The United States has a problem if it's becoming a net importer. And that in and of itself means that having an ally produce helium becomes a vital point from its procurement process. And then the final point is that, unfortunately, when the Earth was made, it was not bestowed with helium in very easy to reach places. The result is that moving helium, you've got to move it to your customer in 45 days. That's a challenge. There is only one country on planet Earth that can reach all 4 corners of the globe in under 35 days by ship. And that is the port of the Cape of Good Hope. And that was why South Africa was actually set up by the Dutch East India Company all that way back when, because it was the spice route. We don't have to go through the Suez Canal. We don't have to worry about pirates on the east coast of Africa. We can get east, we can get west, we can get to Europe in 2 weeks, the United States in 2 weeks, South America in under 2 weeks, Australia in 3 weeks, China in 4 weeks. It makes us strategically the easiest point from which to ship a very volatile, not volatile in the sense that it burns, but volatile in the sense that you're transporting it at such deep cryogenic temperatures that the slightest perturbation to your tanks makes it boil off, and you need it in liquid when it gets to the other side. And that's why South Africa is, you couldn't ask for a better strategic geographic location for helium to be present.
Thank you
Next
very
question,
much for
please.
that one. Yes, thank you. How does liquefied natural gas fit in with the business as a whole?
That's Steph, that's one for you as well, not for me.
Although I will call on Paul after I've spoken, just to speak about on the integration of Renergen and ASP on the use of cheap energy from South Africa to run the plants in Welkom. Welkom is the home of our site. So it doesn't take a lot of searching on the internet to see that South Africa had and still has a very deep energy crisis. The power, you've got rolling blackouts. There's an app on your phone, and the app on your phone tells you when you're going to lose power, and you lose power, whether it's
I will add, we have 1.8 megawatts of diesel generators sitting at the Silicon 28 plant in case we lose power. So that's, and we use them. That's how serious the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point in time when you didn't have power for 13 hours a day. I mean, just try and picture an electronic life with, no power 13 hours out of every 24 hours. So there's a deep energy crisis in South Africa, and there's another looming additional crisis in the form that about 220,000 MMBTUs of natural gas come in per day from Mozambique through a pipeline called the Sasol pipeline. And Sasol has already announced that in 2026, they're shutting that pipeline down to Johannesburg. And they're trying to make additional alternatives available in the form of either higher alkane gases or converting coal into methane, or one of a number of different solutions to try and keep a little bit of gas flowing into the pipeline. But the long and the short of it is that selling natural gas in South Africa, you can get between 13 to 18 bucks per MMBTU if you sell it in liquefied form direct to a customer site. Now, when you combine that with the fact that we've got an abundance of natural gas, because our natural gas is kind of a byproduct of the helium, it puts you in a beautiful position to be able to capitalize on two major revenue streams. The first and the foremost being the natural gas, which you have to evacuate, you don't have a choice. And then the second is obviously the helium side. So on the natural gas side, we've got three primary pillars: selling it as a substitute for diesel into transport, selling it as a thermal alternative to customers, and power generation. And with power generation, I'm going to hand over to Paul, who can give you a little bit of an idea and the flavor as to, again, why there are such synergies between the two companies.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. So I've very much done back of envelope math so far, but I mean the wellhead cost of gas at Velcom is about 35 cents per MMBTU, which compares very favorably to the $2 to $3 you see for Henry Hub. And so, when we think about low cost of energy, we've obviously Iceland is one option, and Velcom is now a second option. So we're always looking for low energy costs for our ASP processes, and this will really, I've also the view we have to have the lowest cash costs and lowest levelized costs of production, and this will allow us to have both of those. So yeah, it's a great fit for the business.
Thank you, gentlemen. How does Silicon 28 improve the speed of a semiconductor? What revenues do you expect in 2025 and 26 from Silicon 28?
I'm gonna let Steph answer this one as well, because he knows a lot more about it than I do. And I'll take the second part. If that's okay, Steph. You do the first part.
Perfect. So the key to semiconductors at the moment is that we've reached a physical limit with regards to what we can do in terms of the number of transistors that we can put on a chip. The biggest issue that you have, without overcomplicating it, is that chips produce far too much heat. Think about it this way. We know thermodynamics, conservation of energy. You don't create or destroy energy, you just convert its natural state. And if you're putting a lot of current and you've got a lot of transistors, in doing the work, those transistors have to generate heat. That heat somehow needs to be dissipated from the system. If there's too much heat, you damage the chip. And if you damage the chip, that would be a disaster. So these chips have built-in natural safety mechanisms, and you've got all sorts of things like thermal throttling, where the chip reduces its speed if it gets too hot. The beauty about isotopically pure silicon 28 versus normal silicon 28 is, think of it this way. A wafer is like a lattice. So picture a page, and there are 1,000 dots on it, and those dots are neatly organized in rows and columns. Perfect lattice. Now picture that, say, 3% of those dots are moving in a completely random, haphazard way, and the rest of them are all moving north-south on the page. But because they're all interlocked, that crystalline lattice is locked in place. So because you've got these 3% of atoms that are just jumping all over the place, the entire lattice has a completely random, unpredictable way in which it vibrates. Now, when you're shooting current or electrons through it, the electrons have to go in between the nuclei. So they've got to go down the paths of where you've got all of these little balls. Every single time that a nucleus hits one of these electrons, it knocks it off course. If you remove the naughty atoms that are moving in a haphazard way, and you have all of your particles all moving north-south, and you shoot your electrons north-south down the columns in between these atoms, electrons don't get knocked off course. The long and the short, you dissipate heat faster, current moves faster through it, and you end up with the ability to put a couple more transistors on the chip, therefore more power. That's the really, really simplified way of thinking about how silicon 28 is really going to enhance chips.
Great. That's more than I understood about semiconductors. That was fantastic. Thank you, Steph. And then in terms of revenues of 25 and 26, we haven't given guidance. You know, we're talking to a lot of customers, and you know, we'll update contracts as and when we get them to the marketplace. But talking to a lot of interest in what we're doing there. Next question, please, Craig.
Yes. Can you provide an update on carbon 14? Is there a penalty to your customer for the delay in the feedstock supply? Also, what is carbon 12 used for, and what is the potential market size? I know that's a lot, but that's what they wanted to know.
So carbon 14, you know, we're going to take over the procurement of carbon 14 now rather than the customer. I think we've got better engineers who can do it better. So we'll start that fairly soon. That should accelerate and get it back on track, or at least make up some of the lost time. Yes, there is a penalty. I believe about a $2 million penalty can be charged to the customer for the delay. And carbon 12 is used. I'm kind of stretching my knowledge here, but I wish I had Jacob on the line. But carbon 12 is used for, I think, quantum sensing, which is used in next generation. Rhino and Steph are nodding, so that's good. It's a positive sign. For carbon sensing, which is used in next generation GPSs. My understanding is electronic warfare is a lot worse than was originally expected or modeled or marketed, and the world needs new GPSs and things like and that kind of stuff. And so carbon 12 goes into that. Anything I should have said I didn't say there, Stefan? I know.
Is essentially anything quantum. Anything quantum related, you need to remove the nuclear spin.
Yep.
Gentlemen, other than party balloons, what is helium used for, and can you get helium-3 from the Renergen site?
Squeaky voices. I mean, don't underestimate the size of the squeaky voice market. Like Alvin and the Chipmunks, I think they were the biggest user of helium in the production of that movie. No, so its single biggest use case today is MRIs. So you cannot manufacture an MRI, and you cannot operate an MRI without helium. Then it's semiconductors, it's rocketry, it's used as a propellant in the expulsion of the gases, which creates the thrust. It's used in the manufacture of fiber optic cables. That's actually a very, very big user in the industry. It's used in laboratories. It's used in pipeline leak detection. It's used in underwater breathing. Surprisingly, that's actually bigger than the balloon market. It's used in welding, for very high-end welding, and then high-end particle physics. The single largest consumer of helium on planet Earth is CERN. They consume just an obscene amount of helium by themselves. So there are a number of applications. It basically touches every single aspect of life as we know it today. There isn't one single part of technology, whether it's your phone or your laptop or your tablet, this call, the way that the ones and the zeros travel through the data lines, all of it used helium in its manufacture or in its operation.
And then the second part? Helium-3. So I'll answer that. So there probably is helium-3 at the Renergen site, but it's probably. Let's assume it's
too early to talk about.
Too early to talk about it. Yeah, too early to talk about it. Yeah.
The stock trading on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange closed today at a 120% premium to the U.S. stock. Is this type of premium normal?
I have no idea. I can't answer that. No idea. Never seen it happen before.
The caveat and the disclaimer is just check the volume before you look at the price.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think probably 10 shares traded something today. So yeah, next question, please, Craig.
Things appeared to have stalled with Nesca and the HALU project in South Africa. Can you provide an update?
Yeah, so I'll let Rhino chip in here, but I mean, you know, we have to go through a licensing phase and a regulatory process, and Rhino and his team are running that at the moment. You know, these things just take time. Governments move slower than companies do, generally speaking, and these are government organizations. I would add that, you know, we're talking to two regulators, the NNR and the DE, the Department of Energy and Electricity. DE appear to be very, very keen for the process to happen. They regulate the procurement, the proliferation kind of risk, and the NNR regulate the safety and what have you of the plant. But Rhino, anything you want to add to that comment? Question.
Yeah. So we have deployed the best people we can find in the country as quickly as we can. We've made enormous strides in the last couple of weeks. I wouldn't paint that statement as absolutely factual. I don't think we've slowed down at all. In fact, I think we've done amazing work in the last couple of weeks. We've got an amazing team in South Africa, a lot of ex-Nexa people, like myself, and we know the right people in the right place, and we've got great support from the South African government on a ministerial level. So.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Next question. Why is the short interest on ASPI so high?
Yeah, again, I can't really, I can't answer. I speak to a lot of investors, but I mean, listen, the short interest in a lot of the nuclear names is high. I don't view ours as being so different. You pick your basket of nuclear names, you know, and listen, it takes two to make a market. You have to have sellers as buyers, so absolutely fine with that.
Do you expect to enter the uranium conversion market, or will you just stick with enrichment?
So I'm going to let Rhino answer this because this is exactly in his wheelhouse. But I would add that, you know, there aren't many people in the world who know how to build uranium conversion facilities. Uranium conversion prices are up 7-fold or 8-fold in the last 2 years. You know, $70 a kilo right now. There's a lot of people in South Africa who have that expertise, but Rhino, you answer that question, please.
Yes, so I think it's a natural evolution of our targets. We have the expertise. We've got a great team of people. South Africa had an initiative 15 years ago that I was part of called the Fluorochemical Expansion Initiative, where they saw the writing on the wall and they realized that all of the greybeards and grey hairs are going to the grave with their knowledge, and they spent an inordinate amount of money making sure that the next generation of engineers and scientists know how to do fluorination on industrial scale, which includes uranium fluorination. So given the need and the market demand and the price for enriched uranium at the moment, it is definitely something that we are looking into, and it is something we are very much interested in.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And thank you to our many participants today. We have so many questions.
Craig, yeah, we can keep going another 5 or 10 minutes. There's still a lot of questions left unanswered, but you know, so have another 5 minutes. Excellent.
We will do that. And again, to our participants, if your question is not answered today, you can email us at aspi@redchip.com. We will forward your question to Paul so that he can see what's on your mind. Gentlemen, how much cash do you have on the balance sheet? You keep raising equity. Why haven't you raised any debt?
Yeah, so we finished the last quarter about sort of 70 million bucks in the balance sheet, I think it was. And you know, if you look at how much we've raised in the last quarter, you know, you'll probably realize we have about 120 plus minus, you know, pro forma for that. So, but I'll let you run the numbers yourself. And you know, having a strong balance sheet allows us to go to government regulators and be in a much stronger position to get deals done, to find customers. You know, I don't think we would, if we're limping along with $10 million on our balance sheet, we probably wouldn't have been able to sign an MOU with Fermi, or for that matter, a deal with TerraPower. So, you know, you have to be well balanced, well capitalized to actually be able to get these contracts. So, the stronger the balance sheet, the better the negotiating position against our customers and our partners. And in terms of where I'm raising the debt, you know, listen, I haven't felt we've been in the position been ready to raise debt, quite frankly. I think that time is changing now. You know, I've been very cautious, always been very cautious. And so, you know, maybe now's the time to look for some debt rather than equity. But yeah, That's what I can say, really.
Can you provide an update on Iceland, and specifically, have you delayed planning for operations in Iceland because of the inexpensive and readily available natural gas from your Renergen acquisition?
Yeah, so we've almost finished the permitting process in Iceland. The Icelandic government's actually changed the laws of the country to allow us to go there, so we're very grateful for that. We've had a great reception from the Icelandic government. We're currently looking for an isotope to build the first plant for in Iceland. I guess we've been slow walking a little bit. The results from the quantum enrichment are looking so good that actually our first plant in Iceland was going to be zinc 68, but we kind of feel, having seen the results of quantum with the ytterbium, we might be better off doing that using quantum rather than ASP. And so we've kind of slow walked the decision to commit to that. The return on capital for a QE plant is substantially greater than the return on capital for an ASP plant. And so again, it's important to, that's the most important measure. And then in terms of would we stall it or delay it because of the cheap gas at Velcom? Probably not. It's going to come down to a decision of whether we want geographic diversification or cheaper gas. I suspect producing at Velcom will be maybe sort of 90% cheaper than producing at Kudasport, where our current silicon plant is. I suspect Iceland's 85% cheaper. And so, it's the decision over, do we want to save a few pennies on our production costs or have some geographic diversification? That's a decision we'll make later on this year.
How will you get the additional money for the plant that Terra Power gave you, a smaller loan based on ASPI being able to get a much larger loan elsewhere?
Yeah, so we're talking to a number of debt providers in South Africa. Think about things like pension funds, government agencies, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of enthusiasm for this project. It's a priority project for the government. And so I've been having conversations with various parties in South Africa over the last sort of 4 or 5 months or so. And I expect to conclude, or get the conclude those discussions and get the funding we require in place by the end of this year, end of this calendar year.
And Paul, I think this will be our final question. How do you protect IP in the USA plant? Will it be operated by ASPI people?
Yeah, so transfer of IP across borders is challenging. We have a strategy to do it. We think it'll save a lot of time, but it's probably not something I really want to talk about on this call right now. But we have a strategy to do it. We have a team of lawyers working on it, and we're very much looking forward to being able to produce isotopes in the US with US employees doing it rather than South African employees doing it. But it's going to require a lot of work and process.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and thank you once again to our many participants today. I'll repeat, if your question was not answered today, or if you have more questions after this webinar is over, email us your question at aspi@redchip.com, aspi@redchip.com. Of course, you can always call us at 1-800-REDCHIP. RedChip also created an information page for ASP Isotopes. It's aspiinfo.com. There you can view and download the investor presentation and fact sheet and sign up for news alerts on ASP Isotopes. RedChip is excited to announce the launch of RedChat, our advanced AI assistant designed to empower investors with instant, in-depth insights on more than 4,000 small cap and microcap stocks. Try it now at aspiinfo.com or at red.chat. Watch Small Stocks, Big Money, RedChip's program featuring exciting small cap companies every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern on Bloomberg USA. And finally, join RedChip's next webinar with Phoenix Motor Cars, Tuesday, September 2nd at 4:15 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Register for all RedChip webinars at redchip.com/events. Thanks again to our many participants today. And thank you, Paul, Rhino, and Stefano.
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Appreciate the time.